The discovery. Dr. Evelyn Carter adjusted the strap of her backpack, the weight of her tools pressing into her shoulders as she trudged through the dense jungle. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of chirping insects and distant bird calls filled her ears. She wiped the sweat from her brow and glanced at the map in her hands, the edges frayed from years of use. The map had been passed down through generations of her family, each member adding their own notes and theories. It was said to lead to the lost tomb of a king whose name had been erased from history, a king who ruled a civilization so ancient that no records of it existed. Evelyn had spent years researching, piecing together fragments of myths and legends, until she finally pinpointed the location deep within the uncharted jungles of South America. Her colleagues had laughed at her, calling her pursuit a fool's errand, but Evelyn was undeterred. She had always been drawn to the mysteries of the past, and this was the ultimate mystery. As she pushed through the thick foliage, her machete slicing through vines, she stumbled upon a clearing. Her breath caught in her throat. Before her stood a massive stone structure, partially buried under centuries of vegetation. The entrance was adorned with intricate carvings, strange symbols and figures that seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light filtering through the trees. Her heart raced as she approached, her fingers tracing the ancient stone. This was it, the tomb of the Silent King. Evelyn set up camp at the entrance, her mind buzzing with excitement. She spent hours documenting the carvings, taking photographs, and sketching the symbols. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing. She lit a lantern and prepared to enter the tomb, her tools at the ready. The air inside was cool and damp, the walls slick with moisture. Her lantern cast flickering shadows that danced along the walls, revealing more carvings and hieroglyphs. The passageway was narrow, forcing her to move single file. As she ventured deeper, she noticed the floor was uneven, the stones worn smooth by time. She tread carefully, her instincts warning her of potential traps. The first trap came without warning. A pressure plate beneath her foot triggered a mechanism, and the walls began to close in. Evelyn's heart pounded as she sprinted forward, barely squeezing through before the walls slammed shut behind her. She leaned against the wall, catching her breath, and realized the tomb was not just a resting place. It was a test. The next chamber was larger, the ceiling vaulted and supported by massive stone pillars. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested a golden orb. The orb was covered in more of the strange symbols, and Evelyn felt a strange pull toward it. As she reached out to touch it, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, speaking in a language she didn't understand. She froze, her hand hovering inches from the orb. The voice grew louder, more insistent, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The walls of the chamber shifted, revealing hidden passages and more traps. Evelyn realized the tomb was alive, reacting to her presence. She had to be careful, one wrong move could be her last. She spent hours deciphering the symbols on the orb, using her knowledge of ancient languages to piece together their meaning. The voice continued to speak, its tone shifting from warning to curiosity. Finally, she understood. The orb was a key, and the voice was guiding her. She rotated the orb, aligning the symbols in a specific pattern, and the ground beneath her feet shifted again. A hidden staircase descended into darkness. Evelyn hesitated, her lantern casting a feeble light into the abyss. She knew there was no turning back. The tomb had chosen her, and she was determined to uncover its secrets. With a deep breath, she began her descent, the voice growing louder with each step. The staircase led to a vast chamber, the walls lined with statues of warriors and priests. At the far end of the chamber stood a massive stone door, covered in more of the strange symbols. Evelyn approached cautiously, her lantern illuminating the intricate carvings. The voice spoke again, this time in a language she understood. "Only the worthy may enter," it said. "Prove yourself, seeker of truth." Evelyn's heart raced as she realized the tomb was not just a physical challenge. It was a test of her mind and spirit. She had to solve the final puzzle to gain entry to the inner sanctum. The symbols on the door formed a riddle, and she knew the answer lay in the knowledge she had gained throughout her journey. She closed her eyes, focusing on the voice and the symbols she had seen. The answer came to her in a flash of insight, and she reached out to trace the correct sequence on the door. The ground trembled, and the door began to open, revealing a blinding light. Evelyn stepped through the door, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had reached the final chamber, the resting place of the Silent King. But as her eyes adjusted to the light, she realized the tomb's greatest secret was yet to be revealed: the spirit of the Silent King. The final chamber was unlike anything Evelyn had ever seen. The walls shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow, as though they were made of liquid light. The air was thick with an almost tangible energy, and the voice that had guided her now seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. At the center of the room stood a massive sarcophagus, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change as she approached. Above it, suspended in midair, was a mirror, its surface dark and reflective, framed by twisting vines of gold and silver. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer. The voice spoke again, this time directly into her mind. "You have proven yourself worthy, seeker of truth, but the final test lies before you. Gaze into the mirror and face your destiny." She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached out toward the mirror. The surface rippled like water, and she felt a strange pull, as though the mirror was drawing her in. She took a deep breath and looked into its depths. At first, she saw only her own reflection, her dirt-streaked face, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. But then the image began to change. Her reflection shifted, aging rapidly before her eyes. She saw herself as an old woman, surrounded by books and artifacts, her life's work celebrated by the world. But the image shifted again, and she saw a different future. One where she was lost, consumed by her obsession with the tomb, her mind fractured by the secrets she had uncovered. Evelyn stumbled back, her heart racing. The voice spoke again, its tone both soothing and ominous. "The mirror shows not what will be, but what could be. The path you choose will determine your fate." Before she could process what she had seen, the sarcophagus began to tremble. The lid shifted, sliding open with a deafening groan. Evelyn's instincts screamed at her to run, but she stood frozen in place, her eyes fixed on the sarcophagus. A figure began to rise from within, a tall, regal man clad in robes of gold and black. His face was serene, his eyes closed, but as he stepped out of the sarcophagus, they opened, revealing orbs of pure light. "I am Amos," the figure said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "The Silent King, ruler of a civilization forgotten by time. You have awakened me, seeker of truth. But know this, my spirit is bound to this tomb, and my purpose is to guard its secrets." Evelyn's mind raced. She had expected to find artifacts, perhaps even the remains of the king, but she had never imagined she would come face to face with his spirit. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice trembling. "I only seek to understand. Your civilization, it's been lost to history. I want to bring its story to light." Amos regarded her with an unreadable expression. "The story of my people is not meant for the world of the living. It is a story of hubris and downfall, of a kingdom that reached too far and paid the price. But you are different. You have passed the tests, and the mirror has shown you your potential. Perhaps there is a reason you were drawn here." Evelyn's curiosity overcame her fear. What happened to your civilization? Why was it erased from history? Amos' gaze grew distant, as though he was reliving memories from a time long past. "We were a people of great power and knowledge. We sought to harness the forces of the universe itself, to bend reality to our will. But in our arrogance, we unleashed something we could not control, a force that consumed us from within. In the end, I sealed our kingdom away, ensuring that our mistakes would never be repeated." Evelyn's mind buzzed with questions, but before she could ask more, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The walls of the chamber shimmered, and the carvings on the sarcophagus glowed with a fierce light. Amos' expression darkened. The tomb is reacting to your presence. You must leave, or you will be trapped here forever. But I've only just begun to understand, Evelyn protested. There's so much more I need to know. Amos stepped closer, his luminous eyes piercing into hers. The tomb's secrets are not for the living. But if you truly wish to learn, you must prove yourself once more. Beyond this chamber lies the heart of the tomb, a place where the past and present converge. If you can reach it, you may find the answers you seek. But be warned, the path is perilous, and the tomb will not make it easy. Evelyn nodded, her determination reignited. I'll do whatever it takes. Amos gestured toward the far wall, where a hidden passageway had opened. Go, seeker of truth. But remember, the tomb is alive, and it will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped into the passageway. The walls closed behind her, plunging her into darkness. She activated her headlamp, the beam of light cutting through the blackness. The passage was narrow and winding, the air thick with the scent of damp stone. As she ventured deeper, she began to hear whispers. Voices speaking in a language she didn't understand, their tones shifting from soothing to menacing. The passage opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was a labyrinth of stone pathways, suspended above a bottomless abyss. Evelyn's heart pounded as she approached the edge, her headlamp illuminating the dizzying drop. She knew one misstep would be fatal. As she stepped onto the first pathway, the whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. She focused on her breathing, blocking out the distractions. The pathways were narrow, some no wider than a balance beam, and the stones were slick with moisture. She moved slowly, testing each step before putting her full weight on it. Halfway across, the whispers became screams, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Evelyn froze, her heart racing as the pathways shifted, some rising while others fell. She had to think quickly. She spotted a stable pathway to her left and leapt onto it, barely catching her balance. The screams grew louder, and she realized the tomb was trying to break her resolve. She pressed on, her muscles burning with exertion. The final stretch was the most treacherous, a series of narrow stepping stones leading to a platform on the far side of the cavern. Evelyn took a deep breath and began to cross, her movements precise and deliberate. As she reached the final stone, it began to crumble beneath her feet. She leapt forward, landing hard on the platform and rolling to safety. The screams faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Evelyn stood, her body trembling with adrenaline. Before her stood a massive door, its surface covered in glowing symbols. She recognized them from the mirror in the previous chamber. The door was the entrance to the heart of the tomb. As she approached, the symbols began to shift, forming a new riddle. Evelyn studied them carefully, her mind racing to decipher their meaning. The riddle spoke of sacrifice and truth, of letting go of the past to embrace the future. She realized the answer lay not in knowledge, but in acceptance. She placed her hand on the door, her heart filled with resolve. I accept the challenges before me, she said aloud. I seek not to conquer, but to understand. The door began to open, revealing a blinding light. Evelyn stepped through, her eyes adjusting to the radiance. She had reached the heart of the tomb, a place where the past and present converged. But what she found there would change her forever. The heart of the tomb. The heart of the tomb was a place beyond time. The chamber was vast, its walls made of a translucent material that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air was thick with an almost electric energy, and the ground beneath Evelyn's feet felt warm, as though it was alive. At the center of the chamber stood a massive crystal, its facets refracting light into a kaleidoscope of colors. The crystal was suspended above a pool of shimmering liquid, its surface rippling as though stirred by an unseen force. Evelyn approached the crystal, her senses overwhelmed by the sheer power emanating from it. The voice of Amos echoed in her mind once more. This is the heart of the tomb, the source of my people's power and their downfall. It is a conduit between worlds, a bridge between the past and the present. Gaze into it, and you will see the truth. She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached out toward the crystal. As her fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy coursed through her, and her vision blurred. Images began to flood her mind. Scenes from a distant past, vivid and overwhelming. She saw a great city, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens. The streets were filled with people, their faces radiant with joy and pride. They were a civilization at the height of their power, their knowledge and technology far beyond anything Evelyn had ever seen. But then the images shifted, and she saw the city in ruins, its once great structures reduced to rubble. The people were gone, their faces twisted in fear and despair. Evelyn gasped, pulling her hand away from the crystal. The images faded, but the emotions lingered, a heavy weight in her chest. "What happened to them?" she whispered. Amos' voice was filled with sorrow. "We sought to harness the power of the heart, to bend reality itself to our will. But in our arrogance, we unleashed a force we could not control. The heart turned against us, consuming everything in its path. In the end, I sealed it away, along with the remnants of our civilization. I hoped that one day, someone worthy would find it and learn from our mistakes." Evelyn's mind raced as she tried to process what she had seen. "But why show me this? What do you want from me?" Amos' form materialized before her, his luminous eyes filled with a mixture of hope and regret. "You have proven yourself worthy, seeker of truth. The tomb has tested your mind, your body, and your spirit. But the final test lies within the heart. You must confront the truth of your own destiny." Evelyn's heart pounded as she stepped closer to the crystal. She knew there was no turning back. She placed her hand on its surface once more, and the images returned, this time more vivid and intense. She saw herself standing before a great crowd, her discoveries celebrated by the world. She was hailed as a hero, her name etched into the annals of history. But the image shifted, and she saw a different future, one where she was consumed by her obsession, her mind fractured by the secrets she had uncovered. She saw herself alone, lost in the darkness, her life's work forgotten. The images faded, and Evelyn stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Amos' voice was gentle but firm. "The heart shows not what will be, but what could be. The path you choose will determine your fate." Evelyn's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had always been driven by her thirst for knowledge, her desire to uncover the secrets of the past. But now, faced with the truth of her own destiny, she realized that her journey was about more than just discovery. It was about understanding, about learning from the mistakes of those who came before. She turned to Amos, her resolve firm. "I understand now. The tomb is not just a resting place, it's a warning. A reminder of the dangers of hubris and the importance of humility. I will take this knowledge with me, and I will share it with the world. But I will do so with caution, with respect for the power of the past." Amos nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "You have learned well, seeker of truth. But the tomb's final secret has yet to be revealed. The heart holds one last test, a test of your courage and your willingness to let go." Evelyn's heart raced as she stepped closer to the crystal. The pool of shimmering liquid beneath it began to ripple, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. She knew that the final test would be the most difficult, but she was ready. The crystal began to glow brighter, its light filling the chamber. Evelyn felt a strange pull, as though the heart was drawing her in. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, letting go of her fears and doubts. She knew that she had to trust in herself, in the journey that had brought her here. As the light reached its peak, Evelyn felt a surge of energy course through her, and her vision blurred once more. She saw herself standing at the edge of a great abyss, the darkness stretching out before her. But instead of fear, she felt a sense of peace. She knew that the abyss was not an end, but a beginning, a chance to start anew, to embrace the unknown. The light faded, and Evelyn opened her eyes. The chamber was silent, the crystal's glow dimmed. Amos' form began to fade, his voice a whisper in her mind. "You have passed the final test, seeker of truth. The tomb's secrets are yours to share, but remember, The past is a guide, not a destination. Use your knowledge wisely, and may you find the peace that eluded my people." Evelyn's heart was filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope as she watched Amos' form dissolve into the air. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had found something far greater than she had ever imagined. A deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. She turned and made her way back through the tomb, her steps light and purposeful. The traps and puzzles that had once seemed insurmountable now felt like old friends, their challenges a reminder of how far she had come. As she emerged into the jungle, the sun was rising, its light casting a golden glow over the ancient stones. Evelyn took a deep breath, the weight of the tomb's secrets heavy on her shoulders. She knew that she had a responsibility to share what she had learned, but she also knew that the journey was just beginning. The tomb of the Silent King had given her a gift, a glimpse into the past and a vision of the future. And as she made her way back to the world, she knew that she would carry that gift with her, always. The burden of knowledge. Evelyn emerged from the jungle, her body weary but her spirit alight with purpose. The tomb of the Silent King had changed her in ways she was still struggling to comprehend. The weight of Amos' words, the visions from the heart, and the responsibility of carrying the tomb's secrets pressed heavily on her mind. She knew she couldn't return to her old life as if nothing had happened. The world needed to know about the Silent King and his civilization, but she also understood the dangers of revealing too much too soon. Her first stop was a small village on the edge of the jungle, where she had left supplies and a satellite phone. The villagers greeted her with a mix of curiosity and concern, their eyes lingering on the strange symbols she had hastily sketched in her notebook. Evelyn paid them little mind, her focus on contacting her team and arranging transportation back to civilization. She needed time to process everything she had seen and learned. When she finally returned to her university, the news of her discovery spread like wildfire. Colleagues, journalists, and government officials clamored for details, but Evelyn remained tight-lipped. She shared only what she deemed safe, a general description of the tomb's architecture, the carvings, and the artifacts she had documented. She spoke of the Silent King as a historical figure, a ruler of a lost civilization, but she carefully omitted any mention of the heart, the mirror, or Amos' spirit. Those secrets were not for the world, not yet. Her caution, however, did little to quell the growing interest in her discovery. Governments and private organizations offered funding and resources, eager to claim a piece of the tomb's legacy. Evelyn found herself at the center of a storm, her every move scrutinized. She knew she had to tread carefully. The tomb's warnings about hubris and the dangers of unchecked ambition were never far from her mind. As the months passed, Evelyn began to piece together a more complete picture of the Silent King's civilization. She spent countless hours in her lab, analyzing the artifacts she had brought back and cross-referencing them with ancient texts and myths. Slowly, a story began to emerge, a tale of a people who had achieved greatness but had fallen victim to their own pride. The heart of the tomb, she realized, was not just a source of power but a symbol of their downfall. But even as she worked, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Strange occurrences began to plague her. Mysterious phone calls, shadows moving in the corners of her vision, and the faint echo of Amos' voice in her dreams. She tried to dismiss it as stress, but deep down, she knew the tomb's influence was not so easily escaped. One night, as she worked late in her lab, the lights flickered and went out. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding in the darkness. She reached for her flashlight, but before she could turn it on, a familiar voice filled the room. "You cannot run from the past, seeker of truth," Amos' voice echoed, his tone both gentle and stern. "The tomb's secrets are a burden, but they are also a gift. You must decide how to wield them." Evelyn's hands trembled as she turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The lab was empty, but the air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. She knew Amos was right. She couldn't keep the tomb's secrets to herself forever, but she also couldn't risk unleashing their power on an unprepared world. The next morning, Evelyn made a decision. She called a meeting with her closest colleagues and confidants, people she trusted to handle the truth with care. She shared everything: the heart, the mirror, Amos' spirit, and the visions she had seen. The room fell silent as she spoke, the weight of her words sinking in. "We have a responsibility," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. The Silent King's civilization was destroyed by their own arrogance. We cannot let that happen again. We must study the tomb's secrets, but we must do so with humility and respect. Her colleagues agreed, and together they formed a plan. They would continue their research, but they would do so quietly, away from the prying eyes of governments and corporations. They would share their findings only when they were certain the world was ready to receive them. But even as Evelyn worked to protect the tomb's secrets, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn back to it. The mirror's visions haunted her, the image of herself lost and alone, a constant reminder of what could be. She knew she had to return to the tomb, to confront the heart once more and find the answers she sought. Weeks later, Evelyn found herself standing at the entrance to the tomb once again. The jungle had begun to reclaim the clearing, the stones covered in a fresh layer of moss and vines. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, the familiar coolness of the air wrapping around her like a shroud. The traps and puzzles were just as she remembered, but this time, she moved through them with ease. The tomb seemed to recognize her, its challenges less daunting than before. When she reached the final chamber, the heart of the tomb pulsed with a soft, inviting light. Evelyn approached the crystal, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was the moment of truth. She placed her hand on its surface, and the visions returned, more vivid and intense than ever. She saw herself standing at the edge of the abyss once more, but this time, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, embracing the darkness. The images shifted, and she saw herself surrounded by light, her hands outstretched as though reaching for something just out of sight. She felt a sense of peace, of understanding, and she knew that she had found what she was looking for. When the visions faded, Evelyn stood alone in the chamber, the crystal's glow dimmed. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had taken the first step toward fulfilling her destiny. The tomb's secrets were hers to protect, and she would carry them with her, always. The mirror of destiny. Evelyn stood before the heart of the tomb, her hands still resting on the crystal's surface. The visions had left her shaken but resolute. She had seen the abyss, the light, and the fragile balance between them. She understood now that the tomb was not just a warning, it was a call to action. The Silent King's civilization had fallen because they had sought to control forces beyond their understanding. Evelyn's task was to ensure that history did not repeat itself. But as she turned to leave the chamber, something caught her eye. The mirror, the one she had seen in the final chamber during her first visit, was still there, its surface dark and reflective. She had avoided it during her return, fearing what it might show her. But now, with the heart's energy still coursing through her, she felt drawn to it. She approached the mirror cautiously, her reflection staring back at her. The surface rippled as though alive, and the voice of Amos echoed in her mind once more. The mirror does not lie, seeker of truth. It shows not what is, but what could be. Gaze into it, and face your destiny. Evelyn took a deep breath and looked into the mirror. At first, she saw only her own reflection, her determined eyes, her dirt-streaked face, the weight of the tomb's secrets etched into her features. But then the image began to shift, just as it had before. She saw herself standing on a stage, addressing a crowd of thousands. Her discoveries had changed the world, sparking a new era of understanding and cooperation. The Silent King's story had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of hubris and the importance of humility. She was celebrated not just as an archaeologist, but as a guardian of wisdom. But the image shifted again, and she saw a darker future. The tomb's secrets had been exploited, its power harnessed for greed and destruction. The world was plunged into chaos, and Evelyn stood alone, her life's work twisted into a tool of oppression. The mirror showed her the consequences of her choices, the fragile line between hope and despair. Evelyn stumbled back, her heart racing. The mirror's visions were overwhelming, but they also gave her clarity. She knew what she had to do. She turned to the heart of the tomb, her resolve firm. "I will not let this happen," she said aloud, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I will protect your secrets, but I will also share your wisdom. The world needs to know the truth, but it must be done carefully, with respect for the power of the past." The crystal pulsed in response, its light growing brighter. Evelyn felt a surge of energy, and the chamber began to tremble. The walls shifted, revealing hidden passages and ancient mechanisms. She realized the tomb was responding to her, guiding her toward its final secret. She followed the newly revealed path, her steps sure and steady. The passage led to a small, hidden chamber, its walls covered in carvings. "May you find the strength to carry it forward." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she read the words. She realized that the tomb had chosen her not just as a seeker of truth, but as a guardian of its legacy. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but she also felt a sense of peace. She knew what she had to do. She carefully placed the scroll back in the box and returned to the heart of the tomb. The crystal's light dimmed as she approached, as though acknowledging her presence. She placed her hand on its surface one last time, feeling a final surge of energy. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I will not let you down." As she left the tomb, the entrance sealed behind her, the stones shifting back into place as though they had never been disturbed. Evelyn stood in the clearing, the jungle alive with the sounds of birds and insects. She took a deep breath, the weight of the tomb's secrets heavy on her shoulders, but her heart filled with purpose. She returned to the world, her journey far from over. She shared the Silent King's story, but she did so carefully, ensuring that the tomb's wisdom was understood and respected. Her discoveries sparked a global conversation about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of humility. The tomb's legacy became a guiding light, a reminder of the fragile balance between progress and responsibility. Years passed, and Evelyn's work continued. She became a symbol of hope and wisdom, her name etched into the annals of history. But she never forgot the lessons of the tomb. She carried its secrets with her, always, a guardian of the past and a guide for the future. And when her time came to leave the world behind, she returned to the jungle one last time. The tomb welcomed her, its secrets safe in her hands. She stepped into the final chamber, the heart of the tomb pulsing with a soft, inviting light. She placed her hand on the crystal, feeling its energy one last time. As the light enveloped her, she felt a sense of peace, of fulfillment. She had done what she had set out to do. The tomb's secrets were safe, its legacy secure. And as she closed her eyes, she knew that her journey was complete.